Hello and welcome to the next video in my Cthulhu Wars coverage. Now, I had a little bit of difficulty working out what to cover. Do I cover like mini expansions which are for all factions and neutral old ones, or do I cover new factions? Well, the opener of the way won the coin toss, so I'm going to cover the new powers first, then we get to all the neutral guys, partly because there's rather a lot of them. Now, the new powers obviously come with a lot of stuff. So you've got a rulebook, a faction card, your spells, your little disc for your Doom track, which of course if you've got the Onslaught 2 plastic tokens, that's a redundant token now, and then obviously your minis. So we've got Cultists and a few other figures in here, and then you've got all this stuff. So let's move this all out the way and we can have a look at these minis. Now I'm pleased to say, because this is a reprint, it does actually come with the new Onslaught 2 style Doom tokens. That's a nice bit. Then obviously you've got your power marker here. Your Cultists, just regular guys, obviously in this kind of purpley colour. We've then got, I believe these guys are called Mutants. These are pretty freaky. Let's see, can we get that to focus? Yeah, they're got kind of various growths on their back. Their guts are coming out there. Really unpleasant figure, so really good job on that. But they're not quite as disgusting as Abominations. Now we've got 3 of these. They're quite a bit bigger than your regular unit, and as you can see, they're pulling their skin up. They've got eyeballs on their knees. They got some weirdness going on with their backsides. They've got horrible bulbs, and they're just really unpleasant. And yeah, another really good job at making, horrible figures. We've then got Spawn of Yog Sothoth, which they got sort of weird backside, various pipes and guts and growths and just all disgusting stuff going on. There's a tiny little skull face, these kind of ripper claws, these kind of goat hooves. Yeah, really, really nice in an unpleasant sort of way figure. And yeah, that's just another great sculpt. And finally, and not least, Yog Sothoth himself in his wonderful disgustingness. I've got a glow-in-the-dark version of this, which is great, but you can actually see a few more of the details on this figure. Just really unpleasant. Really, really good job by the sculptor, as I say. So the opener of the way faction itself. So you've got your regular acolytes that don't really do too much. The mutant, got a bit of combat ability. Abomination, slightly better combat ability. Spawn of Yog Sothoth, much better ability. And then Yog Sothoth himself, who 6 power and replaces a spawn. So you have to play a spawn and then replace him with Yog Sothoth by the looks of it. And the combat is twice the number of enemy controlled. Ooh, right. In play, not okay. He seems quite beastly, and he's the key and the gate, so he counts as a gate, but not for the Beyond One ability. Okay, and can exist in a gates area, so that's a bit freaky. How does he get his spell books? Well, 8 gates, 12 gates, 10 if you're playing with less than 4 players. Units in 2 areas controlled, or gates controlled by other people. Lose one of your units in battle, same area as an enemy old one, and your great old one is in the same area as an enemy great old one. Okay. And awaken Yog Sothoth. So this one is going to be the tricky one. You're going to have to summon Yog Sothoth and move him into an area. But yeah, some interesting little bits and pieces there. Then, of course, we've got the spells. So we got the Dread Curse of Azathoth, the Million Favoured One, channel power, they break through, dragon ascending and dragon descending. And looks like these last two are once only. This one's ongoing, couple related to battle, one in battle, one post battle, and then one that costs points to actually use. So yeah, interesting mix of powers there. It's going to take a little bit of while getting my head around that. The rulebook is about 8 pages, so a little summary of what comes in, how to play, pretty pictures, including some disgusting glossy stuff, and then a nice FAQ. So yeah, nice overall package that. So let's get this one tidied away. Now I'm pleased to say, although it's quite a big box, it does allow you to store everything to do with the faction in the box, so that's good news. And then this just drops on top nicely and you can seal the box. Well, opener of the way, all well and good, but what about the sleeper? Nice new guy, Sabu, if I remember correctly. So you've got your rulebook, gives you a summary of what's inside, how to play, pretty picture, FAQ, so pretty standard layout for these as well, and a couple of special powers. We've got the power sheet, which we'll come back to, spell cards, which we'll come back to, and then nice bright orange gribbliness. Let's have a look at that. Well, as you've probably come to expect, we've got our 6 acolytes, we've got our little power tracker, our doom tracker. We've then got 3 serpent men who are fantastic figures. Little tail, kind of excellent pose, really, really cool. And then we've got, what are they, wizards? Or yes, wizards, which nice man, but something's not right with him. He's got weird wings, and when he lifts up his sort of cloak, he for some reason has a mouth with a tongue instead of a tummy or naughty bits. Yeah, little bit weird. We also have a load of formless spawn, which just look great. They do remind me of the artwork I've seen in, for example, Call of Cthulhu. So really good job bringing that artwork into miniature form. And then, of course, the big baddie himself, Sothoth, who we've already seen in Glow in the Dark, but he is great. There you go, that's better focus. So lovely details, strange sort of man, monster nipples. Yeah, really, really cool, furry sort of skin. Now, his spells, we've got Burrow. There you go. Burrow, Energy Nexus, Capture Monster, Demand Sacrifice, Ancient Sorcery, and Cursed Slumber. And of course, we've got our little token as well. And if you actually look at the faction sheet, so we've got our Acolyte, our Wizard, our Serpent Man, who gives us combat, Formless Spawn, who's got some weird dice roll for combat by the looks of it, and then Sothoth himself, who has power divided, equal to the current power, or 2, whichever is greater. So he's always got 2 combat strength, but he could have more. And he's got a lethargy action, which basically, for 0 cost, you can say, I'm doing nothing. So like a super pass where you can still take action. So that's pretty cool, in my opinion. So as an action, spend 3 power, everyone else gains 1. As an action, spend 3 power, select 1 player to get 3 power. Spend 3 power, each other player loses a power. Roll a 6 or more in a battle. Roll 6 dice or more in a battle, to be clearer. Perform a ritual of annihilation and awaken Sothoth. So it looks like these spellbooks are pretty easy to get hold of, apart from maybe this rolling 6 dice, but you can engineer that. So yeah, interesting faction. I think this is going to be one I'm going to enjoy playing. Okay, this box is Ithacria, or Windwalker. So we've got, as we're probably coming to expect by now, quick summary of what you get, how to play, some nice artwork and quotes and an FAQ. Seems to be quite a few pages of FAQ on Windwalker. Now, I think Windwalker has had his power tweaked. Apparently he's a bit of a combat beat stick, and I believe for Onslaught 2 they tweaked one of his spells, if I remember correctly. Anyway, let's get to the miniatures. Now this is a weird expansion, and I'll come to that why very shortly. So we got our Doom and Power, our 6 acolytes. We then have a couple of units. Now, before I get on to that, we do actually have a weird unit in the form of a glacier. So Ithaqua can create his own glacier, that's rather unusual. Now, this figure I'm not so keen on actually, because I believe this is meant to be a Nochke. Now, my understanding is it's meant to be like a 6-legged rhino, unless I'm confusing it with a different sort of monster. So it's not quite what I was expecting this unit to look like. It looks a bit like a demonic owlbear, if I'm honest. It's got very long arm with long fingers, and then, yeah, just a kind of big furry coat. It's a very weird creature. Much more pleasing to my mind are the Wendigos, which are likely to be very angry because something's gone horribly wrong with their midsection. They're very interesting, kind of rabid Chewbacca type monsters. Now, this is another one of those weird factions where you've got sort of 2 old ones. You've got this giant beetly Cthulhu-headed glacier roaming old one here. This is R'lyeh. It's a great miniature. I actually think it is slightly better than the glow-in-the-dark one. Quite often I find the glow-in-the-dark one is better than this, but yeah, this one I think actually looks better just with the regular miniature. And then of course Ithaqua himself with a nice demonic screaming head, and he's spewing out some cold out of his mouth, and yeah, he's a great figure. He's actually quite big, having trouble getting him in the camera shot here. Yeah, anyway, nice selection of figures. Oh, hold on. Should have paid more attention to how he was in the box. There you go, he's back in. Right, let's get this all packed away. Okay, for the spell books, we've got Herald of the Outer Gods, Cannibalism, Howl, Berserker Gang, Ice Age, and Arctic Wind. So that's going to do some nice funkiness. Then on the actual unit cards, as you can see here, so you've got your Acolyte, your Wendigo, your Nochke. Oh, that's nasty. Equals the number of Nochkes in your unit pool. Okay, so it's cheap to summon as more and more of them come out. It's got a combat of 3 as well, pretty beastly. Then we've got our 2 old ones here. So, okay, you can pay power to cancel out some combat effects. Doom basically makes Ithaqua stronger, and Cultists can't be captured whilst he's in play, so that's pretty good, unless of course there are old ones. How do we get our spellbook? Well, open Rung Tagoth. If you're the first player, take this spellbook at any time. Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. A gate exists in the area marked with Windwalker glyph in which you did not start. Another faction has 6 spellbooks. Awaken Ithaqua. So, sort of weird way of getting hold of some of these. The first player one, that could be tricky, I guess, unless you manage to bluff your way into becoming the first player. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, he's also got a slightly different setup. After everyone except Opener of the Way has set up, you gain 8 power, 6 acolytes, and a control gate in one of the areas marked with this glyph. And obviously, if there's 2 glyphs, that will allow you to gain a spell book. So yeah, interesting faction. Going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I have heard some people claim that this is a pretty powerful faction, which is a shame because I'd quite like to play this, but if it's a bit of a broken beat stick faction, I can see players being a bit like, oh, why have you picked that? You know. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this one on the table. Right, well, this faction is actually the one who I got confused about when looking at the glow in the dark. So Azathoth is Mr. Squiggly. Right, let's get inside the box. Now this box is slightly different from the others. You've got your rulebook, you've got your neutral great old one, which just dropped out nice and easily. So I'm going to file that with my other ones. You've got a whole load of units that you can use as neutral options, and then your spell books, and then a whole load of really cool minis. So let's have a look at them. Now you might notice something strange about this faction. They're all grey. That's because they're neutral. They're not actually a playable faction. They are basically units and a great old one that you can recruit. So that is a little bit weird. So who've we got? We've got our Dimensional Shamblers who, yeah, they look suitably shambly, and I love the facial expression on that. We have Servitors of the Outer Gods who are playing their flutes, so yeah, really fun. Really like that miniature. Then we've got some Star Vampires, which are great. This great big unit here. Now, if I remember correctly, Star Vampires are the ones that are invisible until they suck your blood or something. I can't remember. But yeah, they look really cool. I like them. And then one of my favourites, we finally have an Elder Thing. Excellent. If you've read the Mansions of Madness, definitely worth looking at. And then Mr. Squiggly, yes, Azathoth, with far too many weird mouths and tentacles, and yeah, he's got all sorts of weird unpleasantness about him. Yeah, and a big giant eye. So yeah, slightly weird faction. So we'll have a quick look at the spell books. Okay, so my understanding is you can recruit these spell books, and you've got the Mile Ceremony, the Uma Atawi, Undimensioned, Recriminations, Shrivelin, and The Stars Are Right. Now I'm going to have to read that one. Stars Are Right. During the Doom phase, if you turn in Elder Signs for Doom points, you also immediately receive power equal to their face value. Oh, now that's pretty cool. So yeah, that's a nice little ability. Now that would explain why we have lots of neutral cards and no faction board as well, because this is not a proper faction in the true sense of the word. And the rule book, just quickly show you that. Okay, so with the rule book, again, a few pages, overview of the components. We then have over here on the left talking about the Azathoth expansion is not a playable faction. Instead, it has neutral units and spellbooks available to any player. Then you've got Azathoth, neutral monsters, neutral spellbooks, a nice little bit of fluff, and then quite a few FAQ bits and how do you control stuff and summon stuff, and then of course a nice back cover showing you Azathoth himself. Now when it comes to recruiting stuff, it's a little bit weird. So apparently on page 86 of the Cthulhu Wars rulebook you can find how to recruit independent great old ones, so that's how you get hold of Azathoth. On page 80 apparently we have how to recruit neutral monsters, and then spell books. Basically you just recruit a spell book instead of one of your faction spell books, so it replaces one of your special powers. So that's a pretty nice little way of mixing up the game. Yes, it does remind you that Azathoth has his own spellbook, Nuclear Chaos, which is only recruitable by someone who actually has Azathoth themselves, and it goes on that particular card. So yes, an interesting mix-up. So that only leaves one final faction, which I believe is new to Onslaught 2, and that's the Tikudku or the Chikudku or the depending on how you wish to pronounce them. So let's have a look at them. Well, it's my understanding that this faction is a little bit different from the others. For a start, not only do you get the rulebook and a faction sheet, but you get a faction punch board. You've got your spells, your brain cylinders, some funky icons, and a whole load of figures. Now, what makes this particular expansion very exciting is there's something different going on with the Cultists, because this is an Onslaught 2 expansion, so they slightly mixed up how the box is assembled. So let's have a look. Well, as you can see, slightly different look. The Cultists are a new sculpt. You also get some High Priests. You've got a Proto-Shoggoth, and then your great old one is Yog Sothoth. So let's have a look at these Cultists. So, as you can see, he's a slightly portly gentleman holding a kind of screaming skull above his head. Nice to see a variant sculpt on the Cultist. But yeah, that's an interesting development. We've got also 3 of these High Priests, which have nice big bases. And they've got an unspeakable oath that they can perform, where you sacrifice it and get 2 power. So cost 3 to summon, but if you know you're going to lose it anyway, maybe let it die, get 2 power back. Proto-Shoggoth, yeah, causes terror apparently, so that's going to be a little bit of amusement, I guess. And then there's actually 6 of those, so you've got quite a few of them. Then our old one here is this weird kind of tentacle ball climbing over some kind of weird twisted Stonehenge obelisks. He's got some weirdness. Apparently he has a growth counter, so I guess he slowly gets bigger as the game goes on. And he's got a Hell's Banquet special ability. Roll a 1d6. Oh, okay, so he can grow by 1 to 6 each turn. So yeah, he can get pretty powerful pretty quickly, I guess. So that's a very interesting faction in a rather strange pinkish colour. So we've got a slightly bigger sheet here. So we've got our brain cylinders, I'm guessing faction, and I guess that's the growth icon. So that's what that is. We then got our spells. So we've got Soulless. We have Terror, Martyrdom, Idolatry, Hierophant, and Tablets of the Gods. So yeah, that's an interesting set of spells to kind of get used to. Faction sheet. So got a unique ability of Sycophancy. Set up after all other players have set up except Opener and Windwalker. You then place it. Growth counter is 0. And replace an Acolyte with a High Priest if you're using the High Priest expansion. So you've then got your Acolyte, your High Priest, your Proto-Shoggoth, and Yog Sothoth. So how do we get our spellbook? So another player performs a Ritual of Annihilation, or another player has 15 Doom. You just get the spellbook, earn an Elder Sign, own 3 Elder Signs. As an action, remove your controlled gate in your start area. In Primeval or Shaggy maps, remove any of your controlled gates. Any Great Old One is killed in a battle, and awaken your Great Old One. So very interesting faction. Great to see some new takes on how to do a faction, and that pretty much rounds it up for all the factions. So let me just get this one packed away. Now I found this a little bit tricky to pack away once you punch out the cardboard chits. So I've actually chucked the miniatures underneath, which you can just about see there, and that gives me plenty of room to do stuff. So I might have to revisit how I've packed this away at a later date. And then of course, once you've done all that, just drop on top your faction boards, which I need to sort those out. Rulebook, pop the lid on. Okay, well, there you go. So we've got various factions. So Yog Sothoth, Sabu, Ithaqua, Azasoth, and then this guy whose name's already gone. So yeah, interesting selection. Now, as I say, most of these were out in Onslaught 1. I believe this faction is the new one, and they definitely bring something new to the game. So you can just swap out, for example, if you think Cthulhu's too powerful or you think Nyarlathotep is too powerful. Okay, we'll play with Sabu, so let's swap him out. If you're wanting to play with more players, obviously we've got 4 factions plus our neutral faction. So definitely going to be an interesting mix-up. It's going to make my job much harder to review the overall system because there are so many variations. Going to have to play with 4 players, 5 players, up to 8 players, mixing out different units, different factions. But yeah, it's going to make Cthulhu Wars be very dynamic, and if you're finding it too simple, well, you're obviously not playing with some of these expansions. And we haven't even got to all the other neutral bits and pieces, and there's quite a few of them, so I'm going to have to think about how to approach looking at all of those. Am I going to do it in one video or break it up? We'll see how it goes. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed the videos so far, and yeah, I know some of them are mostly unboxings with I can review them later, but that's because there's just so much stuff, so much variety. I'd be doing a disservice to do a review without actually properly testing them all out. So the big issue for me is I've actually got a game of Cthulhu Wars lined up for tomorrow. Which faction do I fancy playing if I'm not going to play with one of the base factions in the box?